Cheated out of caregiver leave, I triggered Helix's proof mode. Revenge froze their $90 lifeline. My name is Morgan Slate. I am 39 years old, and on this particular Monday morning, the world inside Courant Dynamics headquarters was precisely controlled. The air, chilled to a constant 62 degrees Fahrenheit, hummed with the low, monolithic drone of the industrial HVAC system. It was a sound you learned to ignore, a foundational tremor that vibrated up through the soles of your shoes and into your bones. The carpet, a sea of institutional gray-blue, muffled the sound of footsteps, creating a hushed environment where the only sharp noises were the clicking of keyboards and the hiss of the espresso machine in the distant break room. That machine was always burning the coffee. The acrid smell hung in the air, a constant reminder of ambition soured by haste. It was the official perfume of the third floor. I sat at my workstation, a minimalist expanse of brushed metal and dual 49-inch curved monitors. As the director of revenue operations and data, my domain was digital. It was a world of logic, of structured queries and predictable outcomes, a world that I had built. Today, however, I had to engage with the far messier world of human resources. My sister, Sarah, was scheduled for a complex spinal fusion in 5 days. The surgeon's note, a stark PDF document, was saved on my desktop. It detailed the necessity of the procedure and the requirement for a post-operative caregiver for a minimum of 1 week. Family was non-negotiable. My mouse hovered over the Submit Request button on the company's clunky HR portal. I had entered the dates, selected paid time off, caregiver, and attached the surgeon's letter. 5 days, a blip in the corporate calendar, a lifetime in a hospital waiting room. I clicked. The request vanished into the digital ether with a small, unsatisfying animation of a paper airplane. For an hour, there was nothing but the familiar rhythm of work. Data streams flowed, models updated, revenue forecasts flickered with green and red percentages. My world was in order. Then a Slack message from our chief of staff, David Miller, blinked into existence in my sidebar. David was a man who communicated in corporate haikus, his language stripped of all warmth and ambiguity. Kate David Miller, 9:05 a.m. Upper Kek, Morgan, your PTO request. It's been flagged. I typed back, my fingers moving with practiced economy. April Morgan Slate, 9:06 a.m. Say bro, flagged for what reason? It's a standard caregiver request under our policy. Doctor's note attached. The 3 little dots indicating David was typing appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. He was choosing his words carefully. Akaf David Miller, 9:08 a.m. Habib Buraker, due to 4th quarter push. All director-level leave requires special review. It's with Sienna Arlaj. Sienna Arlaj. The name landed on my screen like a drop of poison. She was the CEO's wife, a woman who held no official title but had somehow been granted veto power over the entire company. Her official, unwritten role was strategic advisor, a meaningless platitude that allowed her to meddle without accountability. She was a ghost in the machine, her influence felt in sudden strategy pivots, unexplained budget cuts, and the quiet disappearance of executives who had displeased her. She had never written a line of code, never closed a deal, never analyzed a data set. Yet my ability to care for my sister now rested in her hands. I didn't respond to David. There was nothing to say. I simply stared at the screen, the low hum of the servers in the nearby data closet suddenly feeling louder, more oppressive. My focus narrowed to the top right corner of my primary monitor, a space I had reserved for a custom-built widget linked to my biometric watch. Heart rate, 72 beats per minute, a little high. I took a slow, deliberate breath, drawing the cold, burnt coffee air deep into my lungs, and watched the number tick down. 70, 69, stable. At precisely 9:23 a.m., a new notification chimed. It was from her. Her profile picture was a professionally shot portrait, all white teeth and hollow eyes. The message was brutally concise. Hafet Sienna Arlaj, 9:23 a.m. Vibrashi no PTO approved. We need all hands on deck for the end of quarter push. Be a team player. Be a team player. The phrase was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting, a silken glove used to deliver a blow. It implied my request was selfish, a betrayal of some unwritten pact. It ignored policy, ignored decency, ignored the surgeon's note that was likely still unread in the system. My fingers moved to the keyboard. My reply was not emotional. It was a carefully calibrated question, a single sentence designed to remind her that rules existed beyond her whims. Etsy she Morgan Slate, 9:24 a.m. Seberg-Bruska. Doesn't our company have an extended FMLA policy for family medical emergencies? I hit send. For a full minute, there was no response. Then a small icon appeared beneath my question. She hadn't typed a word. She had simply reacted with the eye roll emoji, a tiny, pixelated cartoon of condescension. It was a dismissal so profound, so utterly contemptuous, that it felt more violent than any shouted insult. She wasn't just denying my request. She was mocking the very idea that I had the right to ask. My blood ran cold. The ambient noise of the office faded away. It was in this sudden, silent clarity that I understood. This was no longer about 5 days of leave. This was about power. My gaze drifted from the Slack window to the dashboard of Helix, the system that was my life's work. The glowing green data pipelines, the intricate webs of logic, the entire $180 million revenue stream of current dynamics, all visualized on my screen, my creation and hers to leverage. A different kind of notification pulled my attention, an automated alert from our code repository, a system-generated email with a subject line that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. Offual Helix prod user access change notification. I opened it. At 9:40 a.m., a new user had been granted observer status to the Helix master repository. The username was Amber Key. It wasn't an IT account. It wasn't a known engineer. The name was slick, anonymous. An observer couldn't push code, couldn't make changes, but they could see everything, every line I had ever written, every proprietary algorithm, every logical gate that constituted the company's secret sauce. This was not a collaborator. This was a spy. And Sienna was the only person with the clout to authorize such a move without a paper trail. She was preparing to steal my work. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly in the quiet. My eyes scanned the Helix dashboard, a screen I knew better than my own reflection. I saw the ETL streams processing in real time, the AI scoring models pulsing as they evaluated new leads, the revenue predictions updating to the second. And there, in the top right corner, almost invisible against the dark UI, was a small, grayed-out flag. It was a feature no one else knew existed, a module I had coded into the system's core during a paranoid weekend 6 months ago. The label was simple: OA-proof mode, disengaged. I looked down at my watch. Heart rate, 68 beats per minute, slower than before. The anger was crystallizing into something cold, hard, and efficient. I swiveled my chair, my movements measured and deliberate. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, the one that held mundane office supplies. Beneath a pile of company-branded notebooks, I retrieved a small, brushed metal USB drive. It was no bigger than my thumbnail. I slid it into a port on the side of my keyboard. A few silent keystrokes brought up a command line interface. I typed a command, authenticating with a 16-character passphrase. EDR executing key backup. ... A progress bar filled, a complete, offline emergency access key to the deepest administrative functions of Helix was copied onto the drive. UO complete. I ejected the drive and slipped it into an old metal box of paper clips, burying it beneath a tangle of silver steel. A physical key for a digital kingdom. My final actions were swift. I navigated back to the Slack conversation with Sienna. I used a specialized screen capture tool, one that embeds system metadata directly into the image file. I captured her message, my question, and her childish, dismissive emoji. The resulting file contained more than just pixels. It contained the timestamp, the network identifiers, and the source IP address of her device, an address I knew was hardwired to the corner office on the executive floor. The first piece of evidence, I saved it to a secure, encrypted volume on my local machine. I closed the windows, leaving my desktop clean except for the vibrant, living dashboard of Helix. They thought it was their machine for printing money. They were wrong. It was my witness. They thought they could touch my life, my family with impunity. They believed their power was absolute. A quiet thought formed in my mind, as clear and sharp as a shard of glass. Vif, they touch my P-T-O, I touch the logs. To understand what happened next, you have to understand Helix. It isn't a piece of software, it's the company's central nervous system, its conscience, and its memory. I built it to be the single source of truth in an organization that was drowning in opinions. Before Helix, Current Dynamics was a chaotic archipelago of data islands. Our Salesforce CRM held one version of reality while the Zora billing platform held another. The marketing team's ad platforms shouted about lead generation, but their numbers never matched the transcripts from the sales team's call logs. It was a digital Tower of Babel, and the constant arguments over whose data was right were grinding the company's momentum to a halt. Helix changed that. Over 18 months, I wrote the code that built bridges between those islands. It wasn't just about connecting applications, it was about forcing them into a single, coherent conversation. Helix became the universal translator for 23 disparate systems. It ingested everything, every email header from a potential client, every line item from a configure price quote proposal, every recorded syllable from a customer support call, every ad spend dollar accounted for on a dozen different platforms. It wove these disparate threads into a single, unified tapestry of data. With Helix, you could follow the entire life cycle of a dollar, from a prospective customer clicking a targeted ad at 2:17 a.m. to the AI-driven analysis of their subsequent sales call that flagged them as a high-value lead, through the contract negotiation, and finally to the cleared payment in our bank account. It was a map of money, and it was perfect. But its real genius wasn't just in connection. It was in cognition. The heart of Helix is a predictive scoring engine that I designed from scratch. It doesn't rely on a sales rep's optimism or a manager's gut feeling. Instead, it analyzes 47 distinct buying signals in real time. These aren't abstract metrics, they are tangible indicators of intent. How many seconds did a user spend on the enterprise pricing page? Qui brûle? Did they download the security compliance white paper? What was the job title of the person who opened our email, pulled directly from their email signature metadata? Did the phrase board approval or budgetary cycle appear in their call transcripts? Helix weighs every one of these signals, assigning a precise, unblinking score that predicts the likelihood of a deal closing within the quarter. The result was an unnerving accuracy. For 6 consecutive quarters, Helix's revenue forecast had a margin of error of less than 3.2%, 2% in the most recent. The executive board stopped trusting their VP's spreadsheets and started trusting my dashboard. This accuracy bought me autonomy. It bought me trust, and it allowed me to build in the rules. One of the most important was the service level agreement I established with the sales department, which they grudgingly accepted after Helix proved its worth. Any potential deal valued at over $1 million was automatically quarantined. I called this protocol the clean room. Once a deal of that magnitude was entered, Helix had 6 hours to validate every piece of data associated with it. It cross-referenced the client company against financial health databases, verified the decision-maker's identity through multiple channels, and scanned all communications for red flags or non-compliant discount offers. Only after the data was scrubbed, verified, and certified as pristine was the opportunity released into the main pipeline. The clean room stopped overeager sales reps from counting their commissions before they hatched and saved the company from chasing phantom deals. It enforced discipline through data. Discipline required accountability, especially at the top. The most powerful feature I built into the public-facing version of Helix was its audit trail. Any manual adjustment to a deal's data made by anyone with a vice president title or higher was logged indelibly. But it was more than a simple entry in a table. Helix recorded the user's authenticated credentials, a timestamp accurate to the nanosecond, and a unique cryptographic hash generated from the hardware fingerprint of the device used to make the change, their specific laptop, their specific phone. You couldn't just claim your account was compromised. The log didn't just say, "Woohoo, made a change." It said that a person with your credentials, using the same MacBook Pro that logs into the office Wi-Fi every morning at 8:45 a.m., made the change. It made denial impossible. All of this was known. It was celebrated. It was the reason the company was thriving. But there was a part of Helix that no one knew about. A secret module, a silent witness I had coded into its very core. I called it the compliance tripwire, but its project name, the one I used in my private notes, was WebBlue Thread 4. The name was inspired, old Royal Navy practice of weaving a single blue thread into their ropes and sails, an unmistakable mark of ownership that was impossible to remove without destroying the whole. That's what this module was, a thread of truth woven through every byte of data the company produced. Blue Thread wasn't an active tool. It was a dormant listener. It lay sleeping deep within the system's architecture, watching for a specific sequence of events, a pattern I had defined as a potential act of corporate malfeasance. The unauthorized addition of an unknown observer to the master code repository was one trigger. A non-HR, non-managerial account attempting to override a formal PTO request was another. An executive manually inflating a deal's score outside of the clean room protocol was a third. Individually, these events might be anomalous. In sequence, they told a story. When the tripwire was activated, Blue Thread's purpose was to awaken and begin stitching. It would gather the disparate pieces of evidence, the Slack message, the access log, the IP address, the device fingerprint, and weave them together into a single, immutable, time-stamped dossier of proof. The denial of my PTO request, followed by the appearance of Amber Key, had armed the tripwire. The next move they made would likely activate it. The results since Helix went live were undeniable. The active sales pipeline had increased in value by 38% simply because we were no longer wasting time on garbage leads. Contract leakage, customers failing to renew because of missed dates or poor communication, had been cut in half because Helix automatically flagged every contract 90 days before expiration. It was, in the words of our CEO, Pierce Arlage, a machine that prints money. He loved it. He didn't understand a single line of its code, but he loved the numbers it put on his quarterly reports. Sienna, his wife, saw it differently. I once overheard her at a company party referring to Helix as my cute little data toy. To her, it was a novelty, a collection of dashboards and charts that she could point to as evidence of her husband's modern, data-driven leadership. She failed to grasp its fundamental nature. She saw the numbers as malleable, as ingredients to be seasoned with her strategic vision. She didn't understand that the numbers were not the product. The truth was. The sales team, on the other hand, revered it. They loved Helix because it was a neutral party in their endless commission disputes. It ended arguments. The attribution engine could definitively prove which marketing campaign, which sales sequence, and which individual rep had influenced a deal. It was the final word. It was the judge who could not be bribed. And me? I loved Helix for a simpler reason. I loved it because it is impartial. In a world of shifting allegiances, hidden agendas, and political maneuvering, Helix is ruthlessly, beautifully neutral. It has no ego. It doesn't care about titles or relationships. It doesn't know the CEO's wife from the intern in the mailroom. Its only function is to reflect what is. It only tells the truth. And I was beginning to realize that the truth was the one weapon they were completely unprepared for. The message arrived at 12:32 p.m. A single, imperious sentence from Sienna in Slack. AA War Room, now, wait. There was no preamble, no please. It was a summons, not a request. I rose from my desk without a word, the motion fluid and controlled. The office parted for me as I walked, a silent corridor forming between the low-walled cubicles. The gray-blue carpet absorbed the sound of my heels, making my journey feel unnervingly silent, like I was gliding through an aquarium. The war room was one of a dozen glass-walled conference rooms that lined the central corridor, each named after a different nautical term. It was meant to be inspiring, a nod to our company's name, Courant Dynamics. In reality, the glass walls just made everyone feel like they were on display. It was a terrarium for ambition. Sienna was already inside, standing with her back to the door, staring out the floor-to-ceiling window at the gray cityscape beyond. She was dressed in a severe, cream-colored sheath dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her posture was ramrod straight, her blonde hair pulled back into a chignon so tight it seemed to defy gravity. She didn't turn as I entered. The heavy glass door slid shut behind me, its movement so perfectly balanced on its track that it made almost no sound at all. It closed with the finality of a blade meeting flesh. The room was cold, minimalist, a long white table, 10 black chairs, and a single monolithic screen on the wall. Nothing personal, nothing to suggest human warmth. It was a space designed for executions. "Cancel your PTO request," she said, her voice flat, devoid of inflection, the sound of polished ice. She still hadn't turned to look at me. She was addressing my reflection in the window. "It's a formal request under the company's caregiver policy," I replied, my own voice steady. I kept it even, a statement of fact. "My sister is having major surgery. The team needs you for the fourth quarter push." She finally turned, her eyes sweeping over me with a dismissive air, as if she were assessing a piece of furniture that wasn't quite right for the room. "The numbers are soft," Pierce is concerned. I had brought my laptop with me. I placed it on the table, opened it, and navigated to the company's internal policy wiki. I turned the screen toward her. The text was highlighted in yellow. "HE or extended caregiver PTO, Section 4, billions, Hebrasai, Y approved. Leave for the care of immediate family member." The policy is clear, Sienna. It's not discretionary. A small, sharp laugh escaped her lips. It was a sound with no humor in it. "Oh, Morgan, policy is a guideline for the little people. For people at our level, it's about flexibility. It's about what's best for the business." She waved a dismissive hand at my screen. "The business needs you here." She walked over to the table, her heels clicking sharply on the polished concrete floor. She pulled out her phone, a sleek black slab, and tapped on it a few times. A moment later, a notification popped up on my laptop, an email from her. The subject line was simply, "HU Q4 priorities." I opened it. It was a link to a shared spreadsheet. 9 rows, 9 opportunities. Each was a multi-million-dollar deal currently being tracked by Helix. Beside each name was a second column, a target score. All of them were numbers in the high 90s. Well, the deal certain to close threshold. Their current Helix scores were in the low 70s. The total value of the 9 deals was $47.8 million. "Those 9 deals need to move into the commit column by Friday," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if she were sharing a clever secret. "Helix needs to reflect that they are solid. Your system is a little too pessimistic, don't you think? Give them a nudge." She was asking me to cook the books, to manually override the objective, data-driven scores of my system and replace them with her fantasy numbers. It was a violation of everything Helix stood for. It was fraud. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it filled the sterile room. Sienna's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. "I'm sorry? The scores are what they are. They are a reflection of the data. I don't nudge them." She leaned forward, her hands flat on the cool white table, her face inches from mine. The scent of her expensive perfume was cloying. "Listen to me very carefully. You write the code. You make the little numbers go up and down. I make the strategy. The strategy is that those deals get closed. Your job is to make the technology support the strategy. Do you understand?" It was a threat cloaked in the language of corporate hierarchy. As she spoke, her phone, which she had placed face up on the table, vibrated. The screen lit up. It was a push notification from a banking app. The text was small, but in the focused silence of the room, I could read it perfectly in the split second it was visible. UFO Amber Key LLC. Payment received. Amber Key. The Observer account that had been added to my repository this morning. An LLC, a limited liability company, receiving a payment. The pieces clicked into place with the cold, hard certainty of a deadbolt sliding home. It was a shell company, Woherk Shell Company, and she was being paid. I didn't react. My expression remained a placid mask. My gaze flickered from her phone to the glass of water sitting on the table beside my laptop. I reached out, my movement slow and casual, and picked it up. As I lifted it, I tilted it just so, angling the curved surface of the glass. For a fraction of a second, the distorted reflection in the side of the glass showed a sliver of my own laptop screen, a screen she couldn't see from her angle. Reflected in the curve of the glass was a line from an email I had opened just before she called me into the room. It was a forwarded message from our finance department, the official vendor onboarding request for a new strategic data consultant. The new vendor was Abo Amber Key LLC Echuwachuiwe, and at the bottom of the form, reflected in miniature, was the digital signature of the man who had approved it. Her husband, Pierce Arlage. I had shown her my hand without her even knowing we were playing cards. Her eyes narrowed. She had seen my subtle movement. She didn't know what I had seen, but she sensed the shift in the room's power dynamic. She pushed the glass of water back toward the center of the table with a sharp, aggressive shove. Water sloshed over the rim, pooling on the white surface. "Don't be clever, Morgan," she hissed, her voice a low threat. "It won't end well for you." I looked at her, then down at my keyboard. My fingers rested lightly on the keys. My right thumb was positioned over the Command key, my index finger over the F12 key, my middle finger over the B key, a three-key combination I had programmed into the system months ago. A dead man's switch, or in this case a wronged woman's switch, a command that would do nothing visible, no pop-up window, no confirmation dialogue, a command that would simply awaken a silent process deep in the server stack. I pressed them. A gentle, almost inaudible click. A blue thread. On. The trap was now set. The witness was now awake. I looked up from my keyboard at my laptop screen, which had gone dark from inactivity. The two round, recessed LED lights in the ceiling above were reflected perfectly on the black mirror of the screen. They stared back at me. Two bright, unwavering circles of light. They looked exactly like a pair of wide-open eyes, and they were watching. The summons for the all-hands meeting came at 3:15 p.m. It was mandatory. The entire company, or at least those present at headquarters, filed into the main auditorium, a cavernous space with tiered seating and a massive screen that now displayed the Courant Dynamics logo against a backdrop of soaring birds. The air was thick with the scent of lukewarm coffee and a kind of forced end-of-day optimism. I found a spot at the very back, in the top row, leaning against the cool concrete wall. From here, I could see everything. I was an observer, a ghost in their machine. Pierce Arlage walked onto the stage to a smattering of polite applause. He was a man who looked like he'd been assembled from a catalog of CEO parts. Sharp suit, expensive watch, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He radiated a kind of effortless confidence that came from never having his decisions seriously questioned. "Team," he began, his voice booming through the speakers. "What a quarter we are having. An absolutely incredible quarter." He paced the stage, a predator in his natural habitat. "I know we've all been pushing hard, but I want to share something that's going to change the game. We've been developing a new strategic automation initiative, a proprietary platform that is already revolutionizing our pipeline. In the last week of beta testing alone, it has helped us double the velocity of our top-tier deals." A slide clicked on behind him. It was a word cloud of corporate buzzwords: synergy, acceleration, optimization, insighta. At the center, in a massive, bold font, was a single word: Ahtikakilai. My blood turned to ice. Diakila, the Latin word for eagle, a predator that hunts from above. He had renamed my life's work. He had stolen it and given it a predator's name. The next slide was even worse. It featured a simple, elegant org chart for this new initiative. At the top, in the box labeled Project Lead, was the name of our CTO. But just below it, in a larger, more prominent box, were the words ABA Strategic Advisor, S. Arlage. A low murmur went through the crowd. Sienna's influence had always been a whisper, a rumor. Now it was being projected 10 feet high in a darkened auditorium. It was a coronation. As if on cue, a microphone on the lectern let out a high-pitched squeal of feedback, a shriek of tortured audio that made half the room flinch. An AV tech scurried to fix it, but the ugly sound had already pierced the room's polite facade. It was the sound of a system breaking. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I stood in the shadows at the back of the room, a silent witness to my own erasure. Pierce continued to speak, his voice a smooth, meaningless drone. But I wasn't listening. I was watching the light from the projector cut a clean, bright path through the dusty air, illuminating the faces of my colleagues. They were nodding, smiling, applauding a lie. When the presentation finally ended, the lights came up. As people began to file out, chattering about the new Aquila system, Sienna's voice cut through the noise. "Morgan, could you stay for a moment?" Her voice was light, musical, but it carried an unmistakable command. Heads turned, eyes flickered toward me. It was a public summons. She wanted an audience. I made my way down the tiered steps, my footsteps the only sound in my own ears. She was waiting for me at the bottom of the stage, flanked by the CTO and the VP of sales. She had a brilliant, predatory smile on her face. "Morgan, so glad you could stay. I wanted to formally introduce you to the core Aquila project team." She gestured to the two men beside her, who both offered me tight, uncomfortable smiles. "We're all so excited about the transition. We're going to need you to facilitate the final handover." The CTO, a man I had once respected, cleared his throat. "Yes, Morgan. As a first step, we need you to transfer ownership of the production repository, all branches, effective immediately." He avoided my eyes, staring at a point somewhere over my shoulder. Sienna chimed in, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. "The user is Amber Key. I'm sure you know the one." This was it. The final blatant act of theft. They were demanding the keys to the kingdom in front of witnesses, boxing me in, making it impossible to refuse without causing a scene and being branded insubordinate. I gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Of course. I'll take care of it right now." I walked back to my desk through a sea of curious stares. I sat down, my hands steady, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. I opened my terminal. They wanted the repo. They would get a repo. I typed a series of commands. I wasn't transferring ownership of the original Helix repository. Instead, I was transferring ownership of a perfect bit-for-bit clone, a duplicate with one tiny, crucial difference. Embedded deep within the metadata of 1,000 image assets and text files, I had woven an invisible digital watermark. It was a string of cryptographic data that was unique to this copy, and to make it forensically undeniable, I had altered the repository's final commit hash, the long string of letters and numbers that serves as a unique fingerprint for a specific version of the code. I changed a single character, which in turn altered the final hash by a mere 3 bits. It was a change so small it would be invisible to any cursory inspection. But it was a profound one. They were now in possession of a forgery, a brilliant, perfect, fully functional forgery. I hit enter. The transfer command executed in less than a second. "Edo ownership of repository Aquilaprod clone has been transferred to user Amber Key." T. As if on cue, a message popped up in a private Slack channel I shared with a few other senior engineers. It was from one of them, a friend. He was forwarding a screenshot from a channel I wasn't in, one used by the sales team. The message from an account manager read, "Heard the reason for the all hands. Sienna put Morgan Slate in her place. Total drama queen trying to bail on Q4 over some PTO. The narrative was already being written. I was difficult. I was emotional. I was not a team player. They weren't just stealing my work. They were assassinating my character to justify it." I looked at the message, at the casual cruelty of it, and a smile touched my lips. It was a tiny, cold thing, a barely perceptible curve. It felt like hearing the distant, satisfying click of a complex machine engaging, the sound of a well-laid trap being sprung, because at that moment, Blue Thread was already at work. The public announcement of Aquila, coupled with the forced transfer of the repository, had fulfilled the final condition of the tripwire. My silent witness was now an active hunter. Deep in the servers of Current Dynamics, a process I had hidden from the world began its work. It started by scanning the communication logs of the VP of Sales. It looked for patterns, it found them. A text message sent from Sienna's personal phone number, logged as an iMessage, to the VP's phone. The system cross-referenced the timestamp of the message with the CRM. 3 minutes after Sienna had texted, "Push the discount for Apex Industries. Another 5%. We need to close it tomorrow." The VP had manually logged a 5% non-standard discount on the Apex deal. Blue Thread packaged the evidence, the iMessage content, the source and destination phone numbers, the timestamp, and the corresponding CRM entry with the VP's digital fingerprint. It was the first of many such packages. Helix was no longer just a revenue engine. It was an evidence-gathering machine. I minimized the terminal and the Slack window. My work for them was done. My real work was just beginning. I unlocked my personal phone, its screen a stark black. I opened the encrypted Contacts app. I created 3 new entries. 1. E. Checkpoint Alpha, Elias Vance, senior counsel in the state's corporate governance division, a man known for his pitbull-like approach to corporate fraud. E. Braufer 2. Adu Checkpoint Bravo Ere, Keller Morrow, our company's official independent auditing partner, the people whose job it was to certify that our financials were not fraudulent. E. Bro 3. Adu Checkpoint Charlie A, director at North Bay Capital, the private equity fund that managed Corent Dynamics' $90 million revolving line of credit, the money that made payroll and kept the lights on. Legal, audit, finance, the three pillars that held up the company. I looked at the three names on my screen, glowing in the dim light of the now empty office. They weren't just contacts, they were kill switches, and I was ready to start flipping them. The hours after the all-hands meeting were a period of intense, silent activity, not for me physically, but for the ghost I had unleashed within the company's servers. While the office around me buzzed with talk of Aquila, Blue Thread was methodically building its case, brick by digital brick. It worked with the cold, dispassionate logic I had programmed into it, constructing a wall of policy and procedure that Sienna and Pierce had foolishly ignored. They believed rules were for other people. They were about to learn that rules, when codified into a system like Helix, become inescapable laws. Epe Brick 1, AG, the company's own employee handbook, a document Sienna had laughed at. Blue Thread cross-referenced my initial PTO request, its denial, and Sienna's corporate status. It flagged a direct violation. A Section 7, Paragraph C, of the Corent Dynamics Human Resources Policy greater than your all paid time off decisions, including those falling under FMLA or extended caregiver provisions, must be approved by the employee's direct manager in consultation with a designated human resources partner. This approval authority is non-transferable and cannot be delegated to individuals outside the employee's direct reporting structure or official HR function. Sienna was neither my manager nor an HR partner. She was a strategic advisor with no official standing. Her denial of my leave was, by the company's own definition, illegitimate, a corporate action without legal standing. Far more serious, extending beyond internal policy to binding legal contracts. Blue Thread's analysis of Sienna's iMessage communications with the VP of Sales was damning. It identified a pattern of shadow approvals, directives to alter pricing and offer non-standard discounts outside the official CPQ and CRM systems. This was more than just poor practice. It was a breach of contract. Helix automatically cross-referenced the clients mentioned in those messages with our active master service agreements. It found that in 11 of those agreements, representing over $60 million in annual recurring revenue, there was a specific order integrity clause. This clause, insisted upon by our largest enterprise customers, guaranteed that all pricing and discounts would be processed and logged through the approved auditable company systems, namely Helix. Sienna's iMessages rendered those guarantees null and void. We were in material breach of 11 major contracts. To cement this point, Blue Thread performed a correlation I had designed for just such an occasion. It cross-referenced the precise timestamp of each discount-related iMessage from Sienna with the geolocation data from her company-issued iPhone. The data was unequivocal. For each message, her location was logged within a 5-meter radius of the executive floor at headquarters. The evidence chain was absolute: the directive, the timing, the location, and the subsequent fraudulent entry in the CRM by the VP of Sales. Brick 3 error. The motive, Amber Key LLC. Once Blue Thread had the name, it began to hunt through the company's financial systems. It didn't take long to find it. The LLC was registered as an approved vendor, classified as a rebate and conversion consultancy. The system showed a series of invoices and corresponding payments. The payment structure was clever, designed to fly under the radar. Amber Key LLC received a 2% commission on all API and data feed subscription fees paid by our third-party integration partners. It was, in effect, a kickback. Sienna was using her influence to push deals through, deals that often involved these partners, and her shell company was taking a cut of the increased data traffic. It was a self-enrichment scheme, elegant in its simplicity and breathtaking in its audacity. This discovery was the keystone. The existence of an undisclosed related party transaction. The CEO, Pierce Arlage, had personally signed the vendor approval for his own wife's shell company, was a catastrophic breach of corporate governance. It triggered a dozen internal alarms, but the most important was a clause in the company's charter regarding conflicts of interest. The clause stated that any evidence of such a conflict gave the board's audit committee the right to initiate a comprehensive, unannounced, and unrestricted audit of all company financials and executive communications. AP Brick 4 Lowry, the proof of conspiracy. Blue Thread pulled the email from Pierce that had authorized the transfer of the Helix repo to Amber Key. The email itself was simple. Oh, Wepper. My discussion with the team, I approve the Aquila ownership move. Let's get this done. It was sent at 10:07 p.m. London time, where Pierce was attending a conference. The digital signature on the email was valid and timestamped accordingly. However, the official transfer request he had supposedly signed was a scanned PDF attached to the email. Blue Thread analyzed the document's metadata. The EXIF data revealed that the document had been scanned on a Xerox Workcenter machine, model number 7855. A quick cross-reference showed that this specific machine was located in the executive suite at Courant headquarters. The scan's timestamp was 5:02 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Pierce had signed a document in the New York office while he was physically in London. It was a digital impossibility, proving the entire Aquila initiative was a premeditated deception. With these bricks in place, Blue Thread began to build the wall. It compiled its findings into a single, comprehensive report. The document was 72 pages long. It included timelines, data flowcharts, and appended exhibits. A or Exhibit A. Full transcript and metadata of Slack conversation between M. Slate and S. Arlage. AD or Exhibit K. Frame-by-frame hash analysis of the waterglass reflection from the War Room meeting. AP or Exhibit Faubuoye. Correlated GPS, message, and CRM data for 11 instances of contract violation. Every claim was supported by an immutable piece of digital evidence. While the report was being compiled, Helix performed an action of its own. As an autonomous system designed to maintain data integrity, it could not tolerate the manual overrides that Sienna had ordered. The 9 deals she wanted to nudge had their scores artificially inflated. But these manual changes lacked the required validation data from the clean room protocol. After a 12-hour window with no validation, Helix's core logic identified the scores as corrupt. At 3:45 a.m., while the city slept, the system automatically and silently reverted the scores for 3 of the largest deals back to their original data-supported values. Just like that, $32 million in projected revenue vanished from the Q4 forecast. The effect would be noticed by 9 a.m. at the latest. All of this pointed to the final, catastrophic consequence. Our $90 million revolving line of credit with North Bay Capital was contingent on a series of covenants. Buried deep in the legal agreement was a standard clause: the company must not engage in any undisclosed affiliate transactions. The Amber Key kickback scheme was a textbook violation. If North Bay were to learn of it, they would have no choice. Their own risk management protocols would force them to immediately freeze our access to the entire credit line. Without that capital, Courant Dynamics would be unable to make payroll in 3 weeks. It was a corporate death sentence. I sat at my desk in the quiet of the morning, long before anyone else arrived. Blue Thread had completed its work. The 72-page report was sitting in my encrypted drive. The trap was fully constructed, waiting to be sprung. I opened a new email addressed to my own private, non-company account. I didn't write a long message. I simply attached a new document I had created, a 1-page executive summary of the Blue Thread report, distilled into its most lethal points. It was a declaration of war, written in the dry, precise language of a legal memo. I looked at the subject line I had typed. It was a perfect summary of how this had all begun and how it would end. Subject, when leave becomes evidence. I hit send. Another timestamp, another piece of the record. The first move of the new day came at 9:04 a.m. It wasn't a direct confrontation, but a message from Sienna on Slack, her preferred medium for issuing commands. The tone had shifted. The undisguised contempt from yesterday was gone, replaced by a thin veneer of false magnanimity that was somehow more insulting. Becket Sienna Arlage, 9:04 a.m. Abrica Morgan, let's put yesterday behind us. I've spoken with Pierce. We are prepared to creative solution for your family situation. A generous stipend for a private nurse, perhaps. We value you, but we need the real IP. Sign the full, unrestricted transfer deed for Helix today. The offer was as clear as it was vile. A bribe. A creative solution in exchange for the keys to the kingdom. They must have had their engineers examine the cloned repository and sensed that something was wrong. Perhaps they couldn't find the core administrative modules. Or maybe the unusual hash gave them pause. Her message was a confession of their failure, and she was using my sister's health as a bargaining chip. My reply was composed and sent within 30 seconds. Each word was chosen to be a precise, legalistic counterstrike. E. Morgan Slate, 9:05 a.m. Oh, Brora. I do not engage in negotiations regarding company intellectual property where an employee's legally protected PTO is used as leverage. It is against policy. I wasn't just refusing. I was creating a written record of her attempt at coercion. I was framing the narrative. My finger had barely left the enter key when my desk phone rang. It was Pierce's extension. I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a slow breath to steady my voice. Morgan, he said. His tone was not angry. It was worse. It was disappointed, like a father speaking to a wayward child. Morgan, we have worked together a long time. You know I consider our senior team to be like family. I know, Pierce, I replied, my voice cool and even. Sienna is my wife. She is my family. This public contentiousness is damaging. It needs to end. For the good of the company. For my family. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. He was invoking the sacred bonds of family to protect the woman who had spat on mine. And my sister is my family, Pierce, I said, the words coming out as cold and hard as diamonds. Her surgery is in 4 days. The company's policy, a policy you signed off on, is supposed to protect that. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his slow, heavy breathing. He was a man unaccustomed to being contradicted. Don't make a mistake you'll regret, Morgan, he said, and the line went dead. The next attack was not long in coming. At 10:17 a.m., a red alert flashed in a small, permanent window I kept open on my secondary monitor. It was a direct feed from Blue Thread's monitoring module. IAC event, unauthorized access attempt, user, mslate action, administrative token reset, source, 10.1.2.5, server, core pit admin fa. They were trying to lock me out. A clumsy, brute force attempt from the IT department to revoke my credentials. They were panicking. Blue Thread performed its function perfectly. It logged the attempt, the internal IP address, which I knew belonged to the senior CISO admin's workstation, the exact time, and the server that processed the failed request. It was another entry in the dossier, another nail for their coffin. They couldn't revoke a token I had already backed up to an offline physical device. The first tremor of the consequences reached me just before lunch. Mark, the VP of sales, approached my desk. He looked pale, his usual boisterous energy completely gone. He leaned in, speaking in a low, conspiratorial whisper. Morgan, what the hell is going on with the forecast? I came in this morning and we're down 32 million. Helix dropped 3 of my biggest commit deals right back into the pipeline. Is there a bug? We have a board call on Thursday. He was looking for an excuse, a technical glitch he could blame. He was hoping I would give him an easy out. I looked up from my screen and met his gaze directly. No, Mark, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. There is no bug. That's the truth without the makeup. He stared at me for a moment, his face a mixture of confusion and dawning horror, before he turned and walked away without another word. The truth was a bitter pill. The day's most valuable gift, however, arrived at 1:52 p.m. It was an automated notification from the accounting department's portal. A new invoice had been submitted for payment by the vendor, All Amber Key LLC LSUE. I opened the attached PDF. The invoice was for $50,000 for a single line item, DYHQ4 Conversion Optimization Consultancy OEC. It was arrogant, was brazen. But the truly beautiful part was the file attached alongside the invoice PDF. It was a PNG image file, presumably a logo or some kind of branding. The file name was ekikwakila.png ewishi. I opened it. It was a blurry, low-resolution image of a stylized eagle, the exact same graphic that had been on Pierce's slide at the all-hands meeting. They hadn't even bothered to create a new one. Their sloppiness was a prosecutor's dream. They had just digitally signed a confession, directly linking Sienna's shell company to the intellectual property they had stolen and rebranded. This was the final piece I needed. Their overconfidence had given me the smoking gun. My next move had to be decisive. I spent the next hour building. I spun up a new, highly secure virtual data room on a third-party cloud provider, completely isolated from the Courant network. I uploaded the 72-page Blue Thread report and all its appended exhibits, including the new invoice and the damning PNG file. I configured the room's permissions with meticulous care. I then generated 2 unique, single-use access keys, one for Elias Vance, the state legal counsel, one for Keller Morrow, the audit firm. I named the data room something simple and direct, ABA-proof only. The countermove from their side came faster than I expected. At 3:30 p.m., an email landed in my inbox. It was from the company's general counsel. The subject was, "It urgent. Your obligations under the non-disclosure and confidentiality agreement." It was a 2-page letter, dense with legal threats. It reminded me of the severe financial and legal penalties for disclosing any confidential company information, trade secrets, or internal communications. It was a transparent attempt to intimidate me and to silence, a legal scarecrow designed to keep me from going to the authorities. Sienna was reacting to my defiance, trying to put me back in my cage. She didn't know the cage was already broken. As I read the threatening letter, Blue Thread was performing one last beautiful function. It automatically scanned the text of the legal threat and cross-referenced it with the very NDA document it cited. And there, in Section 12, Paragraph D, it found the clause they had forgotten. The clause that is standard in almost every such agreement. It was the EUI whistleblower exceptiona. No part of this NDA shall be construed to prohibit the employee from reporting potential violations of law to the relevant government or regulatory bodies. DEE. Blue Thread automatically highlighted the clause, appended it to the General Counsel's threatening letter, and saved the combined document as a new exhibit in the AWA-proof only, data room. Their last weapon had been turned against them by the very system they tried to steal. The game of chess was over. They had made their last, desperate move, and it was an illegal one. Now all I had to do was tip over the king. Wednesday morning, the air in the office was brittle with unspoken tension. The $32 million hole in the forecast was now common knowledge, a ghost haunting the sales floor. Pierce and Sienna had not yet arrived. They were, I suspected, coordinating their strategy from home. My sister's surgery was 2 days away. My own strategy was already in motion. I had a 75-minute window planned to the second. At my desk, I opened 2 separate encrypted email drafts, one for Elias Vance, the other for Keller Morrow. Each contained a simple, polite message and a single-use access key. I took a sip of my black coffee. It tasted bitter and clean. I hit send on both. A notification appeared on my private dashboard. Ibrha Boa-proof only. User Caro Audit has authenticated. Session started. The first domino had been tipped. Somewhere in a high-rise downtown, a senior partner at the company's auditing firm was looking at the 72-page document that detailed the rot at the heart of Courant Dynamics. He was seeing the Slack messages, the forged email signature, the invoices from a shell company owned by the CEO's wife. He was looking at a meticulously documented case of fraud. The second domino fell. The second domino fell, this one in the halls of government. I received a blind carbon copy of an automated notification from the state's public records portal. It was a feature for which I had registered a mail filter rule months ago. A new investigation ticket opened. Case 774, a 1 upri. Greater than EO subject, unregistered lobbying, vendor inquiries greater than IDO company of interest, Courant Dynamics. Elias Vance worked quickly. The state was now officially investigating. The phrase, shadow vendor, was a direct quote from my one-page summary. The legal machinery of the government had just started to grind, and its gears were turning toward Pierce and Sienna. The financial 7 a.m. Abray. The financial sector's automated immune system began to react. Deep within the risk management servers at North Bay Capital, an algorithm that crawls public and legal records for client-related keywords registered a hit on the new investigation ticket. It automatically cross-referenced the term shadow vendor with the covenants of our $90 million credit line. A yellow flag was raised internally. An early warning system alert flashed on the screen of a portfolio manager, noting a potential breach of the no undisclosed affiliate clause. The bank was now watching. Afi 10:34 a.m. Ibrushi. The ripples reached our customers. The General Counsel of Vidian Dynamics, one of our largest clients and one of the 11 whose MSA had been breached, sent a high-priority email to our own legal department. I saw it because Blue Thread was monitoring all communications related to the flagged accounts. The message was polite but firm. II subject, clarification required. Discount approval process. Abrar. We require clarification on your discount approval process. Our agreement stipulates all pricing changes must be logged via your standard auditable platform. We have reason to believe a recent adjustment was authorized by an external advisor. Please advise on the validity of this change. Within minutes, 2 more near-identical emails arrived from 2 other major clients. The external wall of the company's reputation was beginning to crack. Helix itself made a move. This was the part I was most proud of. I had programmed a protocol for data integrity disputes. After being alerted to the manual overrides and the subsequent investigation ticket, the system's logic determined that the data's integrity was compromised. It automatically generated and distributed a BIDO pipeline restatement proposal to the entire sales and finance leadership mailing list. The proposal recommended, in cold, impartial language, that the manually inflated scores be officially reverted due to a failure to meet validation criteria under the Clean Room SLA. It was the machine, in front of everyone, demanding a return to the truth. 11:48 a.m. Obruka. Pierce Arlage, having just arrived at the office to a firestorm, reacted with predictable panic. A frantic call was placed to the CTO. The order was simple: shut Helix down. Pause it. Take it offline now. The CTO, a man who looked like his soul had been surgically replaced with a stock option plan, tried to comply. He and his senior engineers found they could not. I had built in one final defense. In the event of a formal data integrity dispute being logged, which my restatement proposal had just done, a 24-hour auto system integrity lockway was automatically engaged. No administrative credentials, not even the root keys, could pause the system's core functions. It was an SLA to protect the data from the very people who owned it. The machine refused to be silenced. Afitan 56 a.m. Abruka. Sienna, realizing the invoice was a critical piece of evidence, made a clumsy attempt to erase it. A cancellation request for the $50,000 Amber Key invoice was submitted through the accounting portal. But they were moving checkers around a board where I was playing quantum chess. They failed to understand that our new payment system, which I had helped design, registered every transaction on a private blockchain ledger. Withdrawing the invoice didn't erase it. It simply created a new, immutable entry. EDA transaction ID, 899b4 degrees Celsius, Seer, Ibri, greater than 00 action, user cancellation AG. It was an admission of guilt, permanently recorded with a cryptographic hash. Echoe 07 a.m. Thibrufi. A new log appeared in the ABI proof-only access monitor. Each user, Kmaro audit has initiated download, aquila-prod-clone.zipk. This was the moment the trap sprang shut. The auditors now had the fraudulent watermarked copy of my code. I knew their forensic process. They would run a hash check against the production servers and find the 3-bit mismatch. Then they would run a deep scan and find the invisible watermark I had embedded. They now possessed irrefutable proof that the company's leadership had stolen its own core intellectual property, renamed it, and was operating on a forged copy. A sealed AM. Shebrew. The email that sealed their fate arrived. It was from the director at North Bay Capiers, the CFO, and the entire board of directors. The subject line was chillingly simple. AAI notice of temporary credit facility suspension. The message was short and brutal. In light of a pending state-level inquiry and a potential breach of Covenant 12.4, undisclosed affiliates, North Bay Capital is, effective immediately, placing a temporary freeze on the revolving credit facility for Current Dynamics pending the results of a full internal verification and audit. The $90 million lifeline had been cut. I stood up from my desk and walked toward the break room to get some water. My path took me past the main glass boardroom, the war room. Inside, the scene was a tableau of corporate death. Pierce, Sienna, the general counsel, the CTO, and the CFO were all there. The room was overlit. The recessed ceiling lights cast a harsh, sterile glare on their pale, strained faces. They weren't shouting. They were sitting in absolute, stunned silence, staring at the phone in the center of the table as if it were a bomb. As I passed, I heard a voice from inside, barely a whisper. It was the CFO, for God's sake, can we turn some of these lights off? The glare of the truth was too bright. They just wanted it to be dark. 11:35 a.m. Cabra crew. I initiated the video call. I didn't turn on my camera. There was no need for them to see my face, to search for tells or emotional cues. The data was the only witness required. Two men from Keller Morrow appeared on my screen, their faces grim and professional in the sterile light of their own conference room. The senior partner, a man named Davies with sharp eyes and graying temples, did the introductions. Beside him was a younger man, their head of digital forensics. Ms. Slate, Davies began, his voice a low baritone. We have reviewed the initial materials you provided. They are alarming. Can you walk us through your findings? Of course, I replied, my voice calm and measured. I shared my screen, but I didn't show them my desktop or a slide deck. I shared a single, browser-based application window. It was the Helix UI-proof dashboard WERI, the user interface for the Blue Thread report. It was stark, clean, and utterly damning. I will not be offering any interpretation or speculation, I said. I will simply present the events as the system recorded them. The data is organized along three primary axes of concern. I clicked on the first axis, labeled ETC Data Integrity Voie. A timeline appeared, populated with data points. The first axis concerns the direct manipulation of forecast data. As you can see, at 12:37 p.m. on Monday, I was instructed by Sienna Arlage to manually inflate the close probability scores of 9 specific deals. The system has logged her email, which is available for your review as AR Exhibit Booter. I clicked on a node. A perfect copy of her email appeared. I refused. Subsequently, as you can see from the logs here at 8:05 p.m., that evening, the Vice President of Sales, Mark Walsh, manually adjusted the scores on 3 of those deals from a remote session. Helix recorded his user ID, the device fingerprint of his home laptop, and the precise timestamp. As a result of this unsanctioned change, the company's fourth-quarter forecast was artificially inflated by $32 million. I let the information sit in the silence for a moment before moving on. The second axis, I continued, clicking the next tab, is the matter of the vendor. Amber Key LLC Chuchu. Another timeline loaded, this one showing financial transactions. At 9:40 a.m. on Monday, an observer account, Amber Kiva, was added to the core IP repository. At 1:52 p.m. on Tuesday, this same entity submitted an invoice for $50,000. The invoice, Over Exhibit Duchu, is for conversion optimization consultancy. It included a PNG file, AR Exhibit E, which is an exact graphical match for the Aquila logo presented at the company all-to-hands meeting. Blue Thread's analysis of the accounting system shows this entity is structured to receive a 2% commission on partner API fees and was approved as a vendor by CEO Pierce Arlage. The system has also flagged that the EIN for Amber Key LLC is registered to the same residential address as Sienna Arlage. Davies stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. The forensics expert was typing furiously. The third and final axis is the transfer of intellectual property. I clicked the last tab. At 4:05 p.m. on Monday, following a public announcement, I was instructed to transfer the ownership of the Helix repository to the Uwamber Kiwa account. The authorization for this transfer was an email from Pierce Arlage sent at 10:07 p.m. London time. That is, Ewar Exhibit GUI. I brought the email up on the screen, showing the attached signed PDF. The forensics expert spoke for the first time, his voice sharp. "Miss Slate, can you give me control for a moment? I want to examine the metadata on that PDF." Of course. I granted him remote access. I watched as his cursor flew across the screen, opening property windows and metadata analyzers that were part of his own toolkit. He was silent for a full minute, and then he said, "Mr. Davies, you need to see this." He highlighted a section of the metadata report. The digital signature from Mr. Arlage was applied at 10:07 p.m. GMT, as expected. But the source file, it wasn't a direct scan. The signature was applied to a JPEG image of the scan document. The EXIF data on the JPEG is still intact. It was created with an iPhone 16 Pro, and the creation timestamp is 5:02 p.m. Eastern Standard Time from a device geolocated inside this very building. The document wasn't signed in London. A picture of the document was sent from here to London, where the signature was applied and then sent back. They were creating a fraudulent paper trail. Davies looked as though he had bitten into a lemon. They photographed a scan. Unbelievable. He turned his attention back to the main screen. "Miss Slate, what is your assessment of the intent here?" It was the question I had been waiting for. "The data does not provide insight into intent," I said, my voice a monotone. "It only shows a sequence of actions, their timestamps, and the actors involved. Any conclusion regarding motive would be speculation on my part." My refusal to editorialize, to add any emotional color, had its intended effect. It made the data speak even louder. Davies nodded slowly. "Understood." He conferred with his colleague in a hushed tone for a moment, then addressed me again. "We are classifying this as a high-severity incident. Our preliminary recommendation to the board will have two immediate, non-negotiable actions. First, the Aquila asset, as it is based on a fraudulent transfer, must be immediately isolated from all company operations and financials. Second, all transactions with the vendor Uwamber Key LLC Aju are to be frozen and subjected to a full forensic review. "I have one final document for you," I said. I sent them a file through the chat. It is a one-page summary. They opened it. The title was The Red Line of Truth. .pdf dboua. It contained only 3 questions and 10 timestamps. The questions were simple. At what point does an unauthorized PTO denial become leverage for a directive to falsify financial forecasts? Free. 2. At what point does a CEO approving payments to his wife's shell company become a conflict of interest and potential fraud? 3. At what point does the transfer of core IP based on a forged, multi-stage authorization constitute theft? Beneath the questions were the 10 most critical timestamps of the last 72 hours, a breadcrumb trail of their crimes. Davies read the page, his lips a thin, hard line. He looked up from the document and spoke, his voice now carrying the full weight of his authority. "Miss Slate, thank you. We have what we need for the initial phase. We will be issuing a formal hold letter to the board and general counsel of Courant Dynamics within the next 30 minutes. They will be instructed to preserve all documents, cease all relevant transactions, and prepare for a full audit." A hold letter, a legal cage dropped on top of the entire company. "I understand," I said. I clicked the mute button on my microphone. The call was effectively over. I looked at the small red LED on my monitor that indicated my screen was still being shared, that the line was still open. It glowed in the dim light of my office, a tiny, perfect circle. It looked like a smear of lipstick on a mirror, a mark of something secret and intimate that could not be wiped away. On my private dashboard, in the blue thread status window, a new line of text appeared, time-stamped to the second. ACAR external hold status, active, source, KM auditor 4. The first lock had been turned. The second call was scheduled for 1:40 to 5 p.m. This was not about internal procedure or forensic accounting. This was about leverage. On the other end of the line were four entities that represented the company's lifeblood: the director from North Bay Capital, who managed our credit facility, and the legal counsels from our three largest enterprise clients, Vidian, Omni Global, and Cygnus Solutions. I had invited them to a briefing on a material event impacting contract and credit covenant integrity. The language was dry, professional, and terrifying. I began the call in the same manner as the last, with my camera off and my voice a steady, neutral instrument. Thank you for joining. The purpose of this call is to address a systemic irregularity that impacts the order integrity clause present in your master service agreements and a related matter that affects the covenants of the North Bay credit facility. I will present the system-logged facts only. I shared my screen, this time displaying a clean, side-by-side view. On the left was the standardized text of the order integrity clause from Vidian's MSA, a clause I knew was identical in the others. On the right was a blank space. As you know, I began, Section 8.2 of your MSA stipulates that all pricing, discounts, and commercial terms must be logged and approved through Corent's auditable system of record, which is Helix. This is to ensure transparency and prevent unauthorized deviations from our agreed-upon commercial framework. Any discount offered outside of this process is, by the letter of our agreement, considered invalid. I could feel the collective attention of four very expensive lawyers tightening like a fist. At 8:05 p.m., on Monday, a non-standard discount of 12% was applied to the Cygnus Solutions Q4 renewal contract by our VP of Sales. This discount was not processed through the standard Helix approval workflow. The directive for this discount did not come from an authorized commercial officer. I then populated the blank space on the right side of the screen. It was a screenshot, a clean, undeniable image of an iMessage conversation. The timestamp was clearly visible. The sender was identified by a phone number I knew they could and would trace back to Sienna Arlage. The recipient was the VP of Sales. The message itself was devastatingly simple. VIK push the Cygnus renewal another 12%. We need to get it signed tomorrow. Don't log it in the clean room. Aye. A heavy silence descended on the call. It was the sound of lawyers reading and rereading a single catastrophic sentence. The phrase, "don't log it in the clean room," was a direct, written instruction to circumvent the very controls we had guaranteed to our clients. The first to speak was the man from North Bay Capital. His name was Jensen, and his voice was like gravel being poured onto a coffin lid. "Ms. Slate," he said slowly, "our concern is related, but distinct. In the materials from the state investigation ticket, there is a reference to a shadow vendor named Amber Key LLC. Is this entity connected to these unauthorized directives?" It was the perfect question. He was connecting the contract breach to the financial fraud. I did not answer immediately. I let the silence stretch for a full 7 seconds. I wanted them to feel the weight of the question, to understand its implications. Amber Key LLC, I finally said, is the entity that received a $50,000 payment for consultancy services on the same day the ownership of the Helix IP was fraudulently transferred. The system shows that this vendor was personally approved by CEO Pierce Arlage. It was the lawyer from Vidian who spoke next, his voice sharp with dawning realization. "Let me be clear. Are you saying that the discount applied to the Cygnus deal, and potentially others, was directed by an unauthorized external party? Because if a material discount that induced our signing is invalid, then arguably our entire order is no longer a binding contract." This was the consequence I knew they would see. The legal foundation of their multi-million-dollar deals had just turned to sand. "I can only speak to what the system of record shows," I confirmed, my voice unwavering. Helix's integrity protocols identified the Cygnus discount as non-compliant due to its external origin and lack of validation. At 3:45 a.m. this morning, the system automatically reverted the deal score and flagged the discount in the CRM with the status EAT invalid, external override. The response from Jensen at North Bay was immediate and decisive. He sounded like a judge rendering a verdict. "An undisclosed vendor approved by the CEO influencing deal terms for which it is potentially being compensated via a kickback structure. This is a textbook trigger for Covenant 1244, the No Undisclosed Affiliate Clause. We are legally obligated to act. He took a breath. As of this moment, consider the $90 million credit facility for Current Dynamics to be on indefinite hold, pending a complete and satisfactory resolution of this matter. The sound of the $90 million hammer hitting the anvil echoed in the silence. It was the sound of payrolls being missed, of lights being turned off, of a company dying. Then, surprisingly, it was the counsel from Omni Global who offered a lifeline, albeit a poisoned one. "We are scheduled to renew our own $30 million platform license next month," she said, her voice a careful, calculated measure. "We may be open to proceeding with negotiations, but only under the condition of full operational transparency. That would mean any and all influence from non-employee advisors, specifically Sienna Arlage, would need to be verifiably and permanently removed from the process." She was dictating terms, not just for a contract, but for the company's entire power structure. She was demanding Sienna's head on a platter as a precondition for doing business. The other two clients murmured their assent. The verdict was in. The market had spoken. I had achieved everything I set out to do. All the locks were turning. I spoke one final time, my words directed at all of them. "A final statement for the record. Thank you for your time. I am not asking for any specific outcome. My only objective has been to ensure the integrity of the factual record." I ended the call. The screen went black. I leaned back in my chair. The silence of my office was a stark contrast to the storm I had just unleashed. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a quiet, cold sense of finality, of a complex equation being solved. A moment later, my desktop email client chimed with a new message. It was a high-priority notification, CC'd to the entire board of directors and the CEO's office from North Bay's legal department. The subject line was the sound of a key turning in the final lock. "Edo formal notice, immediate freeze of credit facility, NBC 781 XT." The final call was scheduled for 12:02 p.m. It was a digital guillotine, and every necessary party had been summoned to watch the blade fall. My screen was a gallery of grim faces in small boxes, the 5 members of the Current Dynamics board of directors, their expressions ranging from concerned to furious. Pierce and Sienna sitting together in the glass-walled war room, a portrait of besieged royalty, Davies from Keller Morrow, his face a mask of professional gravity, Jensen from North Bay Capital, his posture radiating icy calm, and the legal counsels from Vidian, Omni Global, and Cygnus, a silent chorus of judgment. I was the only one not on camera. I was merely the executioner. The chairman of the board, a formidable man named Marcus Thorne, opened the proceedings. "This is an extraordinary meeting, under extraordinary circumstances. I believe everyone has been briefed on the preliminary findings from our auditors and the notice from North Bay. Pierce, the floor is yours." Pierce leaned forward, attempting to project an aura of control that he clearly did not feel. His face was pale, his smile a strained rictus. "Marcus, thank you. Before we get into the weeds, I want to say one thing. We are a family here at Current. We solve our problems internally. This entire situation is a profound misunderstanding exacerbated by an employee under considerable personal stress." He looked directly into his webcam, as if he could see me through the screen. "Morgan, I am asking you, for the good of the company we all built, turn off the system. Let's have a real conversation, person to person. Disable Helix, and let's talk this through." It was a pathetic, desperate gambit, an attempt to silence the evidence, to turn the machine off so that human lies could take over. I did not say a word. I did not have to. My response was to click a single button. I share screen A. I did not share a chart or a graph. I shared a single, clean page from the blue thread dashboard. It was a relationship map. In the center was a box labeled Avo Amber Key LLC. An arrow connected it to a series of invoices totaling $50,000. Another arrow connected it to the user account Alav Amber Kiwa, the new owner of the forged IP, and a final thick red line connected it to a third box. This box contained a name and a number pulled directly from state tax filings, a public record. The name was Sienna Arlage 04, and the number was her employer identification number. A second red line connected that same IN to the tax records for her primary residence. The link was no longer an inference. It was a direct, undeniable, and legally verifiable fact. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a boardroom that had just witnessed a corporate assassination. The first voice to cut through it was Davies, the auditor from Keller Morrow. He spoke with the dispassionate finality of a coroner reading a cause of death. Based on the evidence presented and our own forensic analysis, our preliminary findings are threefold. A. Multiple material undisclosed related party transactions. A. Browse 2. Direct non-compliant interference with auditable financial forecasting. A. Bursi 3. Improper and likely illegal transfer of core intellectual property using a forged authorization chain. We have a legal obligation to report these findings. The next voice was Jensen from North Bay Capital. To reiterate our formal notice, he said, his words cold and sharp. The $90 million credit facility for Corent Dynamics is suspended indefinitely, effective as of 11:14 a.m. This morning. The board should prepare for a full covenant review, which, given these findings, it will not pass. Then came the voice of the lawyer from Vidian, representing all three clients. Pursuant to Section 14 of our Master Service Agreement, we are formally declaring a material breach of contract. We are activating our right to void our current order and will be commissioning a third-party evaluation of all services rendered. We no longer have confidence in the integrity of this company's operations. The pillars holding up the company had been kicked out one by one in less than 90 seconds. It was then that Sienna finally broke. She leaned into the camera, her face a contorted mask of rage and disbelief. Her voice was a venomous hiss. You have no right. This is our A company. We built it. Her eyes, wild and furious, seemed to find me even without a camera to look at. You're just a coder, a bitter little girl playing with her computer. I finally unmuted my microphone. My voice, when it came, was quiet, calm, and carried across the digital space with the weight of absolute truth. My code doesn't lie, I said, and it recorded everything. That was all. The final word. The focus of the call snapped back to the boardroom. Marcus Thorne, the chairman, turned his head slowly, deliberately, to look at the man sitting next to Sienna. His voice was low, and it was the sound of iron. Pierce, he said, the name a judgment in itself. Remove every trace of Sienna Arlage's influence from this company's operations. Not tomorrow, not in an hour. I know, It was over. The verdict had been delivered. My work was done. My cursor moved to the bottom of the Zoom window, to the small red button. I did not say goodbye. I did not wait for the screaming to start. I simply clicked Yeeve Meeting. The gallery of faces vanished, replaced by my own clean, empty desktop. In the sudden, profound silence of my office, a single, sharp electronic beep echoed from my speakers, the sound of the connection being severed. And at that exact moment, from the hallway outside my office came another sound. The sound of the executive elevator, a floor above me, beginning its journey down. But it wasn't the usual gentle hum. It was a high, straining whine, a mechanical scream, like a cable had just been cut. Thank you so much for listening to my story.